Welcome, everybody, to my podcast, Meet Me in Napa. I'm your host, Jeremy Jackson, and I'm so glad that you're here with me for another interview. I'm here with a special guest today, a law enforcement officer of 18 years, Josh Coleman. Kind of met this brother, years ago through the barbershop. As I've told you in my first episode, I'm so blessed to meet a lot of people in the community through the barbershop. And so he's somebody that I met, and we, had conversations. We talked about a variety of things. So when I got this thing going, he was more than happy to come and sit down with me. So I'm glad you're here today. How you doing, Josh?
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm well, man. Yeah, no, I feel like we've had thousands of podcasts that no one was listening to.
Right.
Years, you know what I mean? Just sitting in the chair, you know what I mean? Like, it reminds me of, I grew up, my dad was a barber, so
okay,
that very much is
I didn't know that. Maybe you told me, but I forgot or something. Yeah,
no,
okay.
I mean, you got a lot of clients, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's, my dad was a barber, so I very much grew up in that, like, that is a staple of, the place where things get talked about. So yeah, no, I'm well. Thank you for inviting me.
Just by, thinking about neighborhoods or communities, barbershop's a staple. Your postman's a staple, right? Mm-hmm. The guy who's delivering your mail, everybody knows that person. Back in the day, you'd probably be the same, going the same route for 20 years, right?
I think they used to be
that way. Yeah, not anymore. Yeah.
They walked back in the day. You know what I mean? You had the dudes that, it's always the mailman that had like great legs. You know what I mean? Like just monster calves pushing that little cart. You remember the little cart that they would have? The little triangle cart? Yeah. So not anymore. They just roll up.
Yeah, they just roll up.
I saw a mailman in my neighborhood the other day, mail woman in my neighborhood the other day, wasn't even wearing a uniform. She's just driving the mail truck, but jumped out in her plain clothes.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, that's kind of weird.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe the government don't have enough money, huh? But the other person, of course, in the community outside of maybe your local mayor and, city council people are your police officers. And so I think at the barbershop, we've had plenty of, interesting conversations. So, just wanted to have you here and just talk about you. And one of my main focuses here today is just to really, we don't grow up in those communities per se anymore, right? People are moving.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't live where they grew up. So the relationships aren't there like they used to be. The cops used to be your neighbor or used to be, whatever. But it's not it's more of a disconnect these days. And we kind of see that in more ways than one in society. But you are part of the Napa community, right? And this is Meet Me in Napa. So here he is. And just tell us a little bit about your before we get into the career, just tell us about who you are, family, your experiences out here in Napa in the Valley.
Okay. Yeah. Bringing it back to Napa or tying it down into Napa, I didn't grow up here. I actually have only lived prior to being an adult, I only lived in Napa for 4 years.
Okay.
I was born in Salinas, California.
Okay.
Which is, for people who don't know where that is, that's south of San Jose, by about an hour, Monterey County. Mm-hmm. So inland from the Monterey Bay by about, 30 minutes or so. And how that happened is, my mom ended up meeting my dad. My dad was a military brat. My dad is half black, half German.
Okay.
And my grandfather was the commanding officer at Fort Ord in Monterey.
Okay.
Back when it was still a military base.
Uh-huh.
So my grandfather had basically served a number of tours in Vietnam, and while he was stationed in Germany, had met a woman in Berlin, my grandmother, and they had my dad, right? So then my mom ended up meeting my dad. So Salinas was a very, very diverse area of California, like a lot of different areas in California when you have a military base, right?
Right.
Travis AFB in Fairfield.
Did they close down?
Travis is still open.
No, I'm saying in Salinas. You said there was a base in Salinas?
It's close to Salinas.
Oh, okay. Yeah, is it still there?
No, it's what is it called now? Monterey Bay University or University of UCSB Monterey or something like that.
UCSB. Yeah. Okay.
So that whole campus, it used to be a military base.
Okay.
So so that's kind of how that thing happened. But my mom and my dad, they split up before I was born. So I was actually ended up being raised by a different person, my adopted father, who's also a black man from Indianapolis. Right?
Okay.
And so that was a great time. Lived in, he was a corrections officer at Soledad Prison.
Okay.
And my mom and my brother, I ended up having a younger brother, and just just living the suburban life in Salinas, on the outskirts of Salinas, near the lettuce fields, riding my bike around, like it was the 80s, man. Like, you had a bike, you build a ramp with a piece of plywood and some bricks.
I did that,
then,
me and my cousins. Build ramps,
So we would just be off in the fields, picking lettuce and bringing it home, and back then, at that time, you weren't supposed to do that. Like, the farmers would actually get mad at you and, chase you into the neighborhoods and stuff like that. So,
can you imagine adults chasing kids now? That, like, the way we grew up.
So it's funny you say
it
that.
never could happen like today. It'd be child abuse.
Yeah. So it's funny you say that, because I heard I was talking to somebody who was from a different country, Russia, just 2 weeks ago, and she was telling me a story about how she had her husband had an interaction with this kid that was bullying their kid. And when the kid got off the bus, he took off running, and her husband chased him down. And in my mind, I was like, oh no. I'm already thinking about how that call would go and all of the interference you would have to try to run for a dude who's just trying to do the right thing for his kid.
Right.
But you have to explain it to everybody in a time when that's just culturally not.
Yeah,
what
just
we
not.
do
It's not
anymore,
it. Yeah.
I mean, you don't even see kids playing outside anymore.
Well, that's
so
true.
You ain't
no
chasing
kid.
anybody. There's no kids outside. You know what I mean?
Cut the cable wire, then they'll come outside.
Yeah. So I grew up in Salinas, and then spent some time in Seaside. Once I ended up meeting my biological father when I was about 10 years old.
Okay.
And by that time, my adopted father and my mom had gotten a divorce, and so I was raised by a single mom. So
just a quick question. So I know you said that your biological father, he left before you were born, but you never saw him till you were 10.
Met him. Yeah,
Okay.
Never met him. Didn't know I had a different dad.
You thought your stepdad was your.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, you be able to
I understand.
this vibe, right? Like I look like me, and I would we would travel back to Indianapolis, and my dad is darker than you, and my brother's your color. And I'm the whitest. Me and my mom are the whitest people there at the family, functions. And I was raised thinking I was black the whole time I was raised. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know
like
until
I'm mulatto.
Yeah. Well, they're like, oh, baby, you light skin. You know what I mean? And I was like, okay, And so it's the 80s. Like, again, it's like the 80s. So, like, it's funny because I look back now at that time, and it's not that long ago. I mean, it's 40 years ago.
Right.
But you go back and you look at comedy or movies from that time period, interracial marriage was like new. Not new, but like it was more
accepted, taboo. Yeah.
I mean, not Charlie Murphy. Eddie Murphy talks about it in one of his comedy segments. He's like, it's the 80s, y'all. He's like, interracial marriage is cool now. And I'm like, that's crazy to think that's like it's not.
It just wasn't. It wasn't that common. Yeah.
Before those type of things were going on.
Yeah.
So identity issues, like, didn't really become a thing until I actually moved to Napa, which is the interesting part of the story. So like, I was raised in a family. I knew everything was very secure. I believed I was black. My dad was black. My mom, my brother's black. All my uncles and aunts and cousins were black. And then we moved up to Napa. And then I met my biological father, and he was black too. So I was like, it's no big it's no different. We moved from Salinas up to Napa, where there's no black people. I moved here in 6th grade, right?
Yeah.
And
what year was that? That was
1993, maybe.
Okay.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And it was just whites and Mexicans at that time.
Yeah.
And my brother and I went to Shear School, so I did 1 year of 6th grade at Shear School, and it was very, very weird just to try to assimilate and to try to like figure out, because I had never been asked why my brother was black until I moved to Napa. And then people were like, why is he black?
Why is he black?
You
you white?
And I was like, what?
I'm not white.
I'm not white.
You know what I mean? Oh man.
So, and that has been a problem, not a problem.
Sounds like an episode of Everybody Hates Chris or something like
that.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? I'm not black. I'm not white. So little issue has kind of cropped up, as through that time period. And, I was a teenager. So that's the most formidable time of your life, where you're really starting to try to, kind of formulate your self-identity.
You're trying to find yourself and your place amongst everybody else.
Right. And so I went to Silverado Middle School. That said, though, made a lot of good friends while I was here, right? Like a lot of good staple friends at that school, Shear School, that are still friends. Like, I mean, that's where I met G.
Okay.
At Shear School.
Yeah.
And so, because his older brother, I think, was closer in age than I was.
Okay.
And so then I went to Silverado Middle School, which was better for me because at the time, Napa County's schools didn't have a school down in American Canyon. They just had Donaldson Way. They had elementary school down in American Canyon, but they didn't have a middle school down in American Canyon.
Okay.
So all of the American Canyon kids got bussed up to Silverado Middle School. So all of a sudden I was back around black people again.
Yeah.
And I felt at home. I was like, oh, okay, like this, and they were kind of like, it wasn't even, and it's funny because I've always felt this way. Like, American Canyon folk accepted me more because blending was way more common in American Canyon. Right. So like they didn't, if they were like, oh, what, they'd see my hair, like my curly hair, and they'd be like, oh, okay, like what's up with you? And I'm like, I'm mixed. They're like, oh, okay, whatever. And that was it. No more questions asked.
Yeah, they got Vallejo. They're still like Vallejo. You know what I mean?
You got Blasians. You got whatever. Like it's all mixed, right? And so then I went from Silverado Middle School to Vintage. But while I was at Vintage, my mom bought her first house in Vallejo, and we moved out of Napa.
Okay.
And so I was able to be granted an interdistrict transfer. Thank God. Because I didn't want to go to. I even knew at that age I didn't want to have to go to Vallejo schools.
Yeah, right? Vallejo was tough in the 90s. Yeah, it was.
And so and it's still tough. But
it's still tough. Yeah, but
they get different. The problems have changed. There's the different problems, but still some similar issues. And so I ended up graduating from Vintage. I was not a good student. Struggled. I mean, no father in the house at the time. My dad, my biological father, and I were just kind of getting a good.
Move the mic a little closer.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
My biological father and I were just kind of beginning to get some traction on a relationship. My adopted father kind of was waffling a bit and just not really around. And so my uncle, who was also black, a military dude from Houston who came out to Fort Ord, and that's how he met my aunt. He stepped in as like my father figure.
Okay.
And so he would drive from the Presidio, was where he was stationed every day, to come play basketball with us at Silverado Middle School after hours. So he would drive up, meet us, take us out to play basketball, and like all my life lessons, all of the early formation of me as a man came from my uncle, who was just a great dude. He was a military police officer in the military, and just awesome bearing and awesome discipline.
So it even sounds like even before you were born, there was this like type of law enforcement background influence in your family circle, from your grandfather. I mean, just being military, then you're saying your uncle.
So it's interesting. I never really thought about it that way.
Yeah.
But being,
you're seeing that. Yeah, subconsciously you're seeing that, but you're not like, of course you're not breaking it down.
I remember at a very young age having looking up to people who were in uniform. I remember, like I said, my biological or my adopted father was a corrections officer.
Right.
So my mom tells me a story. She's like, yeah, you used to put his hat on and you would walk around the house with your hands behind your back, like you were like on patrol,
Your underwear.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. That's true.
Yeah, I know. That's what kids do. Yeah.
I
used to do. My dad used to have these wear these boots. People are into cowboy boots now, but my dad used to always have boots when we were
everybody
kids.
Wearing cowboy boots now,
bro.
And
it's like it's all coming back. It's nothing
I can't
new.
Do the cowboy boot
Everything
thing,
just there's nothing new.
I can't do it.
Yeah.
I can't do it.
I bought my daughter some for Christmas.
So we haven't got into my career stuff, but even this is a little quick segue. I work for the Napa Sheriff's Office. I can't really talk I'm not speaking on their behalf, but
right.
That's where I work, right? They wear cowboy hats. A bunch of dudes, dude, there's a bunch of dudes I work with that wear these cowboy hats, bro. Never been around cows. How are you wearing a cowboy hat? I can't do it.
Walker, Texas Ranger.
They do. They have they're like, oh, every year it's an email. It's like, hey, we're ordering cowboy hats. And I'm like, I grew up in apartment complexes, bro. I can't wear a cowboy hat, dude. I've ridden some horses from time to time, but I'm not a cowboy. So
that's funny.
Yeah. So, I guess there was really from my uncle. My uncle was very disciplined. I remember he used to talk about how early he woke up. he would tell me stories about when he was in the military and how he went about being in the military, and like how he always sought to be, his terms, like squared away. And he's
right.
he woke up a half an hour before because of his shaving regimen, because of his neck and the way he had to shave. He had to get up every day before everybody else, like an hour before everybody else, to get his stuff squared away. So he was like, that was very much like how he led his life, and I always looked up to that.
Right.
And so, but although at that time, because he was around, but like not full time.
Yeah, not every day. Yeah.
I wasn't ready for that. So my life was not disciplined. I started smoking weed in 8th grade. Like as a young kid, I was failing all my classes. I was hanging out with people I shouldn't have been hanging out with. You know what I mean? So, high school was rough, but I got through it. And then after I graduated, I ended up. That was really the epiphany I had. It was my senior year. I was like, you know what? I can't be a failure at life. And so I decided to lock in and figure out what I wanted to do. And I went to Solana Community College for a couple years. Then I lateral transferred to Sonoma State, got my BA in English literature, got a job with the Vallejo Police Department. They put me through the academy. I went to the Oakland Police Academy.
Now, did you know while you were in college, I'm going to go work for the force?
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
So I had three major dreams when I was a kid. I was like, okay, I want to be a firefighter, I want to be a fighter pilot, or I want to be a fighter pilot. Or I want.
Why is it? Was it because of Top Gun?
Bro, come
okay,
on,
Dude, Tom Cruise got like,
you know what I mean? Like, I went and saw the second one. It was amazing. I sat in the front row. All my kids were like looking. I was just like, this is amazing.
Yeah,
man. Yeah. I wanted to do that, and then I realized that you got to be good at math. And
I swear to God, that was the same. I was like, I want to be a pilot, and I remember being told everything. I was like, I'm not going to be that good at math, which is. Kids, if any kids ever watch this, don't count yourself out like that. You can do anything you want to do, but at the time, I was thinking that, like, yeah, I don't want to know that much math. Yeah. So became a barber. So go ahead.
Yeah. So so I ended up graduating from Sonoma State, but I went toward my strengths, which was literature. When I was in college, I fell in love with the study of the human narrative and the human condition.
Okay.
And so just reading, that's really all English is. Like, people think about English from like high school, and it's like, oh my God, like I don't want to Shakespeare and this and that and da-da-da. And it's like, I fell in love with the fact that, Shakespeare is just about being a human. Like all of the Shakespearean plays are just about being a human. They're about what conditions and what certain pressures will cause human beings to do certain things, and all those things are still true.
True, yeah, that is true.
Shakespeare was ahead of his time.
Yeah,
he was writing plays in the 1400s.
Yeah,
and he pretty much wrote every possible tragedy that could happen.
Yeah,
so
it still happens
when you
today.
watch movies, when you watch a movie, you're just watching a Shakespearean theme. And I think it's amazing. Like, I think it's amazing the stories of human beings, right? And so that's why I think this type of stuff is important.
It's funny that you say that, because I didn't know it at the time, but I grew up going to church every Sunday.
Yeah.
But
same.
I remember this so vividly. Like,
God, man,
we would learn about like David or something, and then but then when that's like Sunday school, right?
Yeah.
But then I get to like the service is all about being holy and righteous, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, but I'm reading all these stories, and I'm just like, and I'm like, well, man, these people were like terrible people, right? Yeah. So I kind of fell in love with it kind of that way, the route of like through the stories of the Bible.
Yeah.
Just like, because I feel the same way. Every possible story that you want is in there. There's betrayal, there's murder, there's backstabbing, there's governments toppling, governments fighting each other, people sabotaging. It was all, it's wild.
It's all there.
Yeah. It's all there.
Wild stories, man. But those stories are still happening.
Yeah.
And so like that was my educational background. I loved college, man. College was really, really, really fun. I really enjoyed the stretching of my mind. I really enjoyed the working on expanding my worldview. And I just liked that. I liked talking about things that, at that time I was, as you move through life, your viewpoint changes, right? So
yeah, definitely.
Who I was when I was 20 and 21, 22 years old is different than who I am now.
Right.
And so I loved, debating the teacher on, different issues or different topics, or, or a class member who had a different viewpoint. And it's like just kind of hashing out those ideas. Mm-hmm. It was very, very fun, which is why I think I still, when we talk in the barbershop, it's like, I'll never discount somebody's position, like, or their opinion. I'm always willing to listen to somebody and go, okay, that's interesting that you think that. Why do you think that?
I think that is true, because even that was kind of led to some of our kind of deep discussions, because I would have a viewpoint, and I'd be like, well, what about this, or what do you don't think this, or what about?
But you always ask me, what do you think?
Yeah.
You were never like, I know this to be true,
right,
and then just say what you think. You'd always be like, he's like, yeah, you hear things that are like, what do you think about this? And then you allow me the space to say what I think, and you were never like, nah, I disagree with that. You were just like, okay, which I think, we're kind of in a position right now in the world where I think we need to, like, communication is not just about talking. Mm-hmm. It's about listening also, and I think we oftentimes are just waiting to talk. Like, people are just waiting for their turn to talk, to counter the points that you're saying, Right. So yeah, and then after that, I graduated, got married super young. I got married right after I graduated high school, 24 years old, and then went
college.
College. Yeah. Got married right after I graduated college, and then immediately right after I got married, went into the police academy. So if you look, you read between the lines, you're like, oh, people are like, well, why did you become a police officer? And it's like, well, I was thinking about this today, because I was, there's that stereotype. The stereotype's like, oh, the people who became police officers are always the kids that got picked on in high school, and they were nerds, and they were this and that, or that. And I think that's, stereotypes come from
half-truths.
I think that's half true, right? I think that does happen. When I look back at who I was when I was in high school, and like who I am, compared to who I am now, are there people out there who might watch this and go like, oh, he was a nerd in high school?
Yeah.
Maybe, you know what I mean? Like, maybe, you know what I mean? Like, I definitely wasn't square, right? Like, I was out doing too much when I was in high school. Thank God I'm even here, you know what I mean? Like, but I do think it's true that a lot of people become police officers are children of chaos. A lot. Like, when I think of most of my coworkers,
that's an interesting
they are children of chaos. They are kids that I know, people who grew up in motel rooms with mothers that were drug addicts. I know people who one of my closest friends whose dad was a Hells Angels member and mom was a drug addict, right? And like most of these dudes, single moms, just trying to make ends meet, and I think they felt out of control. So I was thinking about myself. I'm like, why did I do this? And I'm like, I remember I grew up in places where, like, if you have never seen a human body where you live, like a murder scene,
right,
you're privileged, right? And I think I've seen it 3 times growing up, right? And so I remember feeling out of control where I lived and unsafe where I lived. And so I wanted to be a person who makes it safer for the people who live on that street. I remember when my mom moved to Vallejo, we lived on Capitol Street, and we had prostitutes walking up and down the street. We'd come out to go to school in the morning. There'd be used condoms in the driveway, broken glass in the driveway. Getting I remember my mom's minivan got broken into, and her laptop that she needed for work got stolen. And the police officer showed up and sat out there and talked with us for 40 minutes, which, granted, at the time, crime was a lot slower in Vallejo. They had a lot more police officers. I know that's probably not happening these days. But he sat out there and he made us feel good about where we live. And he's like, oh, I'll drive by later on tonight and check it out.
That and just to me, that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about community. Yeah. Right. So you have like this. It's like, it's not just like, hey, I'm getting a job. I'm writing these reports. I'm going home.
Right.
Like, he showed care and that obviously left. It's almost
I remember a
positive. Yeah. Like,
I remember
for you
his
to tell
name.
that story. Yeah. Right.
So when I got hired, I went up. I'm like, you're Steve Kreitzman. You're the person who you probably don't remember this, but you did this. 100% it leaves an impact.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to cross my fingers so I remember to talk about this,
Okay.
but I'll get to this. So we had a dude who lived like 3 or 4 houses down from us, and he was a D-boy. And so he was a drug dealer, for those who don't know. Like he was dealing crack. And so we had people up and down the sidewalk, in and out of the alley all night, all times of night. And my mom couldn't even get from like the car to the house without having like a bad interaction with somebody, right? And so, and my mom is a small woman. She's 5'5". She'll say she's 5'6", but she's 5'5". Little blonde white lady, and she ain't scared, right? And so she was like, she would take these people to task, and they were like this lady ain't scared at all of us, right? Yeah. So she calls up Vallejo PD, and she's like, hey, I got this problem. I want you guys to solve it. And they were like, well, will you let us do surveillance inside your house? And she's like, absolutely. So these dudes came to the house, and they sat in the house, and they were watching the traffic from inside my house. A week later, not even 3 days later, they showed up. Carloads of the task force, they used to call them, but carloads of people show up. They do a search warrant, and then dude's gone. And to see the immediate impact that had on the street, it was like the clouds had parted and the sun was shining, and all of a sudden, all the little people who lived on the street were able to come out of their houses and kind of move a little freer and breathe a little lighter. And I saw that, and I was like, that's what I want to do with my life. And, there was a murder down the street where I live. There was like down by the little Vista apartments and stuff like that. And so like, that's why I say that, like, I want to be the type of person, I want to be one of the people that comes out here and does the heavy lifting and puts their hands into the soil to like actually try to make this neighborhood a little bit better and a little bit easier to walk in, So that's why I did it. It's not, but it's a version of that, right? It's a version of, it's not the bully thing, but it's like, did I have low self-worth? Yes. Did I want to feel like I was a more valuable person because I was out here wearing this uniform and, but I came from, modest conditions? Right. Absolutely. And I think a lot of the dudes that I work with, that's kind of their story too. Okay. Even up here in Napa, like there's dudes that grew up living in, vineyard housing and, but saw themselves as like, the deputies are like, oh man, like that's who I want to be like. Yeah. So like, I think that story is still true, in all different types of agencies,
So where are you at today? What are you doing? What's your like title in law enforcement today?
So I've been a sworn law enforcement officer for 18 years. I'm also, within law enforcement, I have worked narcotics enforcement. I've worked as a detective. I've worked in courts. I currently work as a school resource officer in the city of American Canyon, and which is the best job that I've done so far. And I also serve as the vice president of a nonprofit, which is a California Law Enforcement Association, serving the legal needs and the training needs for law enforcement officers across the state.
We spoke about this a little bit off mic, but go ahead and just give us a little bit about like what that is. What does it entail?
So I'm the vice president of the California Force Instructors Association, which is a training and advocacy group. So within all professions, there's you have these conferences, yearly conferences. In law enforcement, they have conferences about the California Narcotics Officers Association, which is multi-thousands of officers big. And they'll have a conference which is 3 or 4 days of training related to that specific type of work. Or you might have robbery investigators or homicide investigators association or the tactical officers association or whatever. So there's always different associations that crop up dealing specific with different law enforcement
aspects,
training aspects, right? Yeah. The California Force Instructors Association's sole mission is to raise training standards in California, to educate, and in doing that, to educate California law enforcement so that we are better in all ways at our job, and also to advocate for California law enforcement by educating the public and by helping the public understand our job so that we can make informed decisions about police reform. So like police reform is a huge topic of discussion right now.
Just 1 second before I let you get into that part. This organization that was started, what was it birthed out of? It was birthed. Was it something that's paid by law enforcement? Or is it a California like state initiative thing, or what? Where does it come from?
So the association was birthed out of. I'll just tell the story. So it started as a small group of people in Southern California. It was like 20 dudes that wanted to get together, and they were the lead instructors. Let me back the train up. So if you have an agency, right? Within that local agency, we have what's called subject matter experts, which means they're the person in that agency, or a person most knowledgeable, a PMK. An SME or a PMK is a term that we use, right? An SME or a PMK is a person in that organization that happens to have had through their career the most experience, the most training, been an instructor and taught the most of a specific subject, right? And that could be canine. It could be, canine use. It could be firearms. It could be driving. I happen to have become a subject matter expert on the issue of police use of force, right? So what that means is, for the last decade, I've been teaching police officers about when to use force, the statutory authorities that allow them to use force, and when it's appropriate, policy on force use, case law decisions through Supreme Court decisions or whatever it is about force use, and then the practical application, like actual, hands-on what to do because of what I've been involved in and what I train in, right? Okay. So like I have a Brazilian jiu-jitsu background, things like that. So I was driving up and down the state of California teaching. I was flying up and down the state of California teaching for a company, and I was teaching at an agency in Southern California, Newport Beach. And I met this dude who had started this association. His name was Tracy McKenzie. And he's like, hey, I have this little association, And I was like, oh, that's an interesting association. Like, I want to be a part of it. And so then I was able to get our agency to be a part of it. And then from there, we just grew, and we've been growing since then. So we went from being 20 members to 500 members. We went from having a one-day symposium to having a 3-day training symposium that's going to happen in Napa this year. And so,
when is that?
You should actually come.
When is that going to be?
August 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Okay.
So it's private. It's only for law enforcement officers and or partners who are within law enforcement. But you should come. I'll give you like a private VIP, pass, so you can come and kind of see what it is, because I know you have you'd be very interested to see what we're talking about, and like from an industry inside the industry, what's going on. But basically and I'll just boil it down. We're not trained enough. That's bottom line. Like, cops are not trained enough. That's like, I'll simplify all of that.
Officers saying that, I mean.
I'll simplify all of that crazy gibberish to simply say, police officers are not trained enough. When you at home watching this on your phone, or driving and watching it on your phone.
Yeah, right.
Think about who's showing up to your house. Don't think of us as this specially trained, remarkably smart, above average, physically gifted, better physical shape group of people that are going to show up and help you. Just point to a random person in the crowd, and that's about the level of skill and experience you're getting to show up to your call. You might get lucky and get somebody who shows up to your call who's in great shape, knows the law very, very well, understands all of the ins and outs of the newest court decisions that are happening as soon as they're happening,
right?
And trains in some sort of physical control thing and can shoot like Keanu Reeves and John Wick. That is probably not what you're getting, though.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and that's our mission. Our mission is to change that. Most people don't really think. So like a police academy is 900 hours. Okay. It takes about 6 months. Only a small portion of that, maybe 20 hours, is devoted to physical skills. Okay. So like teaching you, if you decided you want to be a cop, teaching you how to physically control somebody, only about 20 hours is devoted to that. Okay. When you get out of the academy and you become an actual sworn police officer and you're driving around in a patrol car, the state mandates that you have 4 hours of physical skills training every 2 years.
Wow, only 4 hours.
Yeah.
And so any other extra training you have is out of your own pocket on your own time.
That's how it's been, and that's what we're trying to fix.
Okay.
So if you look at somebody, and I can think of here in Napa, I can think of one thing I will say is that from when I started to where we are now, and it's not the solution for everything, but jujitsu has become a huge talking point with police training, and way more police officers train jujitsu than ever before.
Yeah.
Now
I've seen that.
Now I don't think they're doing it because smart people decided that they should.
Right.
I think they're just doing it because the sport has become more popular. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
But my problem is that 20 years ago, someone should have gone, this is important, and you guys should do. Which is my problem with the police reform movement, right?
Uh-huh.
My problem is that you go back to Obama's Commission on 21st Century Policing. He invited hundreds of police experts from across the country to come to Washington, D.C. and try to solve these issues. They came up with the, I think it's like 6 pillars of 21st century policing, right? But we didn't focus on teaching people to make better decisions under stress. That's the crux of the issue. If you want to reduce police shootings, you have to teach regular people how to perform better under stress. You have to teach
the officers or the citizens.
Officers.
Okay.
Officers.
Yeah.
Right. It's a twofold thing, and thank you because you bring that up. Like it is a two-way street, and I do say this all the time. Like we as a society focus on if let's call it a critical incident, because that's our industry term. So a critical incident, like a police shooting. If that's an intersection, we as a public only talk about what happened on Officer Street, right? So there's a car on Officer Street driving to the intersection, and there's a car on Suspect Street driving to it, and some of the viewers are gonna be like, I don't like the term suspect, right? Like, sorry, but that's the legal term, okay? So if there's a car on Officer Street driving to the intersection, and there's a car on Suspect Street driving to the intersection, and there's a crash that happens in the intersection, we only focus on all of the things that happen on Officer Street, all of the things that person should have known, should have done, could have done, techniques that should have happened, strategies that should have been put in place, de-escalation that didn't occur, all these different things. We focus on that. We never focus on the decision-making that led all the way up to that
crash,
point, right? Because there's 2 people involved in this. Here's the fundamental difference, though. One person is sworn on behalf of the public to be there. The other person's not, right? That's the problem that people are like, well, I don't understand how police are treated differently. It's because you're asking us to do this on your behalf. It's like the garbage man. You don't got to walk up and down your street picking up trash, right?
No.
Because the garbage company does it for you.
Right.
But what if the garbage company didn't exist? You'd have to do it yourself.
Yeah.
And that's essentially the service that we provide for the public.
So and with that being said, like, and I don't want to make this, into a
police thing.
Right. More
That's just
so.
That's just my
I would say that the public, I think the public, no matter how, from the public to the policymakers, all the way back to what affects your day-to-day line of work.
Yeah.
I think most people, when I talk, just like when I talk to you, and I'm lucky to have someone close enough to me who's in law enforcement that I can, have a conversation with. But for the common person, they're just more or less like, we just want more accountability.
Yeah.
Like, what would you say to that when somebody's saying there's just not enough, not on the very fine, like nitpicking thing, but just, hey, if there's somebody who's completely wrong, I'll take this for instance, right? Since the Me Too movement, if somebody comes out, just, some type of, essay or, other type of things, if let's say it's a teammate, right? Then the Lakers got to come out. Every player has to say, hey, hey, that was wrong.
Right.
We disown that. We don't condone that.
Right.
He's out of here, right?
Right.
I think people would just like to see more so like other officers say, you know what? We know that was wrong.
Yeah.
This, we're not.
It's hard to do that.
And I understand there's a culture and there's a lot. It's easy.
There is that too.
There's that too, right? But I would just think that for me, that would just be like, hey, because sometimes we just see things and we're just like, that looks pretty wrong, and then it gets
Pick
into
one.
I don't know. I don't want to do that. I don't want to take it there. You know, that's not what this is about. You know, and maybe what we could do is we can come back and like have that deep dive.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't mind doing that, but I just wanted to be like, you know, but okay, just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
You know, let's just say we have Eric Garner.
Okay.
Right. It just looked like he was just choked to
Yeah.
death. Right. To the naked eye, we're just like, man, that didn't seem. You know, most people just would be like, he got choked to death.
Right.
The only difference is that the guy that did it had a uniform on.
Right.
So he kind of gets away with that.
Right.
I don't even know if he was prosecuted or not because I don't know.
No.
But so it's just stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So that's interesting. That's all of that very, very interesting. And there's a recent study that was done. I can't remember it off the top of my head who did it, but I'll send it to you afterwards. And it is a study that dives into the public's perception of wrongdoing versus industry experts, lawyers, police officers, whatever, perception of wrongdoing. And they're worlds apart, right?
Yeah.
So what the public sees and thinks is misconduct versus what is legally and statutorily allowed are two different things.
Right.
And that's one of the biggest problems. But I think that I think that why we are there is because we, as an industry, have done a terrible job of explaining to people what we do and how we do it. Part of that is because if you go back when I started, we didn't feel we had to.
You didn't have to.
Right?
Yeah.
We're the police. Like here's an example, okay? So now you see these body cameras of shootings, right? Okay. The reason that you're allowed to see those is because there was a law passed that says that in circumstances that meet a certain criteria, departments have to release body camera footage related to the incident within 45 days. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. But it's a criminal investigation, yes?
Yeah.
Okay. That someone may have to have a jury trial for. Let's say it's the officer, right?
Uh-huh.
So let's say the officer is going to be prosecuted.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So a jury trial has to happen for the officer. All right. Well, in what other circumstance would we release video evidence of an incident to the public to be viewed before the jury trial?
Nothing.
Never.
Yeah, never.
Because it goes against your Sixth Amendment right, right?
Right.
But the public wants, like, we say it in the industry, like, public doesn't know what they want. You use the Lakers example. Yes, you're right. The Lakers come out. Private industry. What happens if the Lakers decide, you know what, this ain't fair. I don't want to read that letter. I'm done. Mm-hmm. Who's going to play basketball, right? Well, it's a sport. No one cares. But for us right now, we're dealing with crippling recruitment problems. Mm-hmm. No one wants to be cops because the circumstances, the cost, it used to be, it's like, oh, you might lose your life doing that job. Now it's not only that you might lose your life, you might lose your life. You could be made to be a villain in the public and have the news in on your front lawn while your wife's just trying to take your kids to school, or you could be criminally prosecuted, right?
Right.
So I think it goes back to education, and it goes back to, and that's part of the association that I'm in. It's a huge amount of work line. I know we don't want to make this all about that, but yeah, I spent a lot of time up and down the state talking to people, different podcasts, doing a lot of different podcasts where I talk specifically only about that type of stuff. That's basically my work.
So basically, let's just say, the incident I brought up, right? What your organization does, or what you do specifically, is you train people for those type of incidents.
Correct.
You're like, hey, if you are in this incident, this is how you go about it. This is what you do. This is so.
And we're also advocating. We're also advocating because there's things that were done. That I won't say that one in particular, but if you look back at the overwhelming majority of these sensationalized incidents, the fact pattern that the public is aware of and that the public knows is not the same as what is actually known factually in court. What's the record, right? Uh-huh. And that's true with even some of the worst, right? I would say George Floyd is a huge one, right? But if you look at the actual fact record of what is known to be true, both by the defense side and the prosecution side, versus what the public actually knows, the public thinks completely things that are not at all true.
Can I ask you a question? Just because we're on that topic, I know you talked about you with the dynamic of your mother being white and you being black and you being raised black.
Yeah.
So what's interesting to me is that like since you're like your uncles and them, they were in law enforcement, did you have a lot of negative police rhetoric at all in your immediate family?
Yeah.
You did? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I grew up hating cops.
Okay.
I do. I remember I got stopped on Jefferson Street. Bro, okay. We gotta paint the picture, okay? We gotta paint the picture.
Yeah, it's like it's in Napa.
Okay. Yeah, let's paint the picture. Remember, I am a kid who thinks he's black, right? Like, or although I present differently in the world, right? But like my mental identity is now I view myself as just a mixed person, which is easier for me to move in the world and people understand that versus when I tell people like I'm black, because I'm not. I'm like 25% black, right? I'm wearing a do-rag, okay, because my hair is curly, but at the time I had waves, I had a do-rag on. So the world appears to be a white kid driving a '67 Chevelle Malibu with a do-rag on, and I do a burnout.
67? I liked it.
It was nice.
My buddy had a '69 Chevelle. Oh, I used to love that car.
I crashed it like 6 months after I got my license. But I do a burnout in front of what used to be Taco Acapulco, right? And I do a burnout. Whoa, get into traffic, drive off, and I get pulled over by a Napa police officer. Okay, pulls me over, walks up to my car, and he asked me for my license, and I give it to him, and he looks at my license and he goes, Vallejo, and he looks at me and he's like, what are you doing up here, right? And inside, I was like, racist.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like, why would you? What? I can't be up here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I can't be in Napa because I live in Vallejo. Like, I had that's where you talk about worldview.
Right.
Now I get to look at it from his perspective, where he was coming from in the world. It's the middle of the week. It's school hours. I'm 16 years old, right? Yes. What are you doing? Your license says Vallejo. Why are you up here? You should be in school. Also, why are you doing a burnout in our city? You know what I mean? Like those type of things. Those are normal questions, right? But like in my mind, the way he asked it, it meant something different to me than what it means to me now, right? Okay. So, remind me where we were going with this.
So I was asking about negative, like, experience,
so,
like, because just with and so kind of like when I asked that, the reason why I was asking that because as we talk about oftentimes,
lived
experiences, right? And then you have the racial component, which you just can't get around it.
Dude,
you know what I mean?
I
you just cannot get around it when it comes to policing in America, right? Nope. And so, the reason why I asked that is because then growing up, you see these things, you have the Rodney Kings, you have these different incidents that happen. Then you become an officer, like. So obviously your perspective. I don't know how I want to word it. Basically, you understand the perspective of a community that feels their police differently.
Yes.
Then you know what I mean. So how did that even play out in your day-to-day interactions? I gotta take a water break.
I'm going to say something that's going to...
Hey.
So, got me feeling like I'm on Club Shay Shay, bro. Damn, you need better cards, dude.
I told you.
Cards,
did I
bro.
not say before? I said, hey, I don't want to...
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, man.
When I first got hired, I knew. So when I first got hired, I told myself, you tell yourself things, right? Like you create narratives, you tell yourself things. What I told myself when I first got hired was, I'm going to be a different type of cop, right? I'm going to be one of the good ones. As if I knew what the ratio of how many bad ones there are out there, right? Or if there are any bad ones out there. Based on what had been told to me, I've never been a cop. This is what I tell people all the time when I talk to them. I go, especially like now I'm at the high school. So I talk to these 16, 17-year-old kids. I go, that think that they know things about the world. And I go, have you ever been 42? And they're like, no. You ever been married? No. You ever been a cop?
It's not like me talking to my kids.
Yeah. You ever been a cop? No. You ever graduate from college? No.
Yeah.
Then why do you assume that you know something? It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's the belief that you know more about something because you don't know what you don't know. Right? And so when I first became a police officer, I knew in my bones that I was going to experience rampant racism. I was going to experience cops using the N-word. I was going to experience cops treating people, dragging people into the bushes and all this. I was like, I'm going to see it. I'm preparing myself for the time that I'm going to see it. And I never saw it. And I was like, oh my God. Like, and this is when I was young. I was 21 when I first got hired in a training program. So I'm riding around as a young kid. I wasn't a cop yet, but I was wearing like a little light baby blue little shirt and like hanging out with the people and stuff. And I'm like, I'm going to experience it, right? And what I saw was, yes, there were people that I worked with that were white. There were people who listened to country music. But I saw that they had their hands in the community. Like, these dudes were driving, they cared, like, to a crazy level. It takes a special person to care about a community that's not their community, right? Like, these dudes wanted to solve the homicide. Somebody would get shot and killed, and they wanted to give the family justice, and they would work tirelessly to try to find out who did it, right? And at the same time, I saw that we were doing it to ourselves, man. Like we were like shooting like to a crazy level, bro. Like, people were robbing the So there's a guy who does statistical analysis. Okay. Well, actually, I won't even use him. I'll use Roland Fryer. Okay. So Roland Fryer is a black Harvard economist. Okay. He's done a number of different studies into law enforcement on a national scale. And Roland Fryer did this study where he wanted to prove that police shootings were disproportionately affected black and brown people, minorities, right? And he's like, I want to prove it statistically, so there's no debate about it. And he proved himself.
And I don't like the word minority for the sense of
neither do I.
People
neither
like
do I.
Yeah,
Else. Neither
but
do
anyway,
I.
But I'm just saying that for.
I'm a child of the '80s, and that was a word that we used. So whatever. So he proved himself wrong, and he was like, no, this can't be right. And so he hired 8 more research assistants and redid the study completely all over again from the beginning. And then he proved himself wrong again. He did show that on low level uses of force, like grabbing somebody or pushing somebody up against a wall or whatever, that there was a disproportionate effect between people of color and whites. But as far as lethal force, that there was no disparity, right? He goes to publish it, and when he goes to publish it, his department in Harvard is like, you can't publish this, and he's like, why? And they're like, well, because it's just not going to land well. And this was during a trying time. This is 2016.
Okay.
And he's like, if I had found in this research that, you can look this up, man. I'll send you the podcast with him and Barry Weiss. Very, very interesting. He goes, if I had proven that there was, in fact, a disproportionate amount of shootings, would you let me publish it? And they're like, yes. And he goes, well, then it's the truth, and I'm publishing it anyway. They fired this dude. Dude, they fired this dude, right? All sorts of issues, launched all these crazy accusations. He ended up getting his job back, but he went through this whole thing because he was countering this narrative. What he found...
What was his name?
Roland Fryer.
Roland Fryer.
Yeah,
okay.
From Florida.
All right.
He did another study on police reform. So in the conventional sense, we'll think of it like what we know as consent decrees, but we'll pick a city like Oakland, right? And people celebrate the fact that they had federal moderators come in, and those federal moderators, and I'm working my way back to what we were talking about a few seconds ago. But they have these federal moderators come in. The federal moderators will make certain police reforms, like basically force changes down the department's throat. Like, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this, do this. Roland Fryer's study finds that overwhelmingly police reform in that conventional sense hurts black victims and brown victims more than it helps them. And the reason why is because police contacts go down and crime goes up, right? So if you think about, I don't know, you grew up in Fairfield, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you just think like, okay, you knew who was doing what in the neighborhood back when you were growing up? Who were their victims?
People look like them.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that you're doing crime in the neighborhood you live in your community. Who are your victims?
Yeah.
They're people who look like you.
Mm-hmm.
So when we stop, when the public has outcry and goes, we want you to stop, and we stop, the victims keep becoming victims because there are bad people in our community who are doing bad things. So I saw, to answer your question, what I thought I was going to experience, I'm not saying that there's not racist police officers. I'm sure there are, right? I'm not even going to say I'm sure there are. There are, okay?
Right.
There are. But the harm caused by people like that, in my personal experience, is not even measurable, okay? The harm that is caused by thinking that everyone is, and then trying to get those people to stop doing, like, law enforcement, the harm that is done doing that is detrimental to people who live in neighborhoods like that. You know, so when your patrol car stops swirling the neighborhood because he's afraid, like, of having an encounter being misconstrued, and he goes, here's, and this is what I'm just going to say it the way I say it because I don't care. Sorry, folks in Napa, but folks in Napa are never going to not have their police. They're always going to have their police.
Yeah.
The people who live in Silverado Country Club, always going to have their police. Okay. The only police that we mess with are police in black and brown.
Inner city
exactly.
Police.
Exactly. That's the only police that we mess with.
Yeah.
We're tinkering with how they do what they do, and we don't like to use tasers. We're going to do this. We don't want to do this. Well, the outcome is bad for people in those neighborhoods. I'm just not down with that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
you know, it's funny. It's funny that you say that because this had to be like last year. There was
you live in Napa. You know you're getting your police, bro.
No. No, hey.
You're like, hey, Josh, I need you to be over here, bro.
Look, I'm in my 40s. You know, when you're 40s paying taxes, you love the police. You know,
Josh, there's somebody in my bushes right now, Josh. Yeah.
You know what I mean? No, seriously, it was funny because what you said was this is like a true story. I was in a barbershop and somebody was like, hey, they like I saw like police, because where we're at on Jefferson Street, the police.
That's just how we do it.
They just, you see it. I'm like, oh shit, you know. So then I heard like somebody was like, yeah, somebody did a smash and grab at the Lululemon, right? So then they.
I was on that one.
They did a smash and grab, right? Lululemon. Yeah. That CHP chased them all the way back to Oakland, right? So I laughed.
I may or may not have been in that one.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. I think, well, I know CHP, yeah, but I
know exactly which one.
What was funny about it, I said, well, I thought they have like this law where you can't chase someone after like a certain amount of mileage or something, right? I don't know. I thought it was, right? Yeah. But and then I said, oh, shit, that shit ain't happening in Napa. They gonna take because they're not about. To your point,
that's an example.
They're not gonna allow you.
Example.
They're not gonna allow you to bring certain activity out.
That's a perfect example
in certain areas where maybe in if it's San Francisco or Oakland, you can just do it and walk away. Well, you used to before they just passed this law. But
perfect example.
Yeah.
So no chase policies.
Yeah,
okay? We call them no chase policies. Where did they originate?
Yeah,
they originated in Oakland.
Yeah.
Then it spread to Emeryville, and then San Francisco, and then it started spiraling out to agencies outside of that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, where do they not exist?
Yeah, obviously not here.
Okay, right? Like I think Napa PD went through a little thing like that where they were doing that for a bit, but I think people at some point when it starts affecting people's property and people are like, what are you doing?
But then that kind of lies into the other thing too. Like that's what police are for.
Yes.
Like
it's the operative word in the phrase law enforcement, right? Like the idea that like we have a set of collective values that we have all agreed upon that we all go, hey, like this is all good for us, right?
Yeah.
We want this to happen. And then every once in a while you got somebody, and it's not often, it's rare, it is, right?
Yeah.
But you got somebody who doesn't want to do it and you go, you got to do it. And they're like, no, I'm not going to. And you're like, come over here and make him do it.
Yeah.
And like that's just what it is.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, that's what was the name of the organization you're with? The
California Force Instructors.
California Force Instructors. And so I really like that. I like that idea because forget the requirement. It's kind of like I think you brought the point early off mic. You were saying, hey, if I were to teach you to cut hair and I only taught you 4 hours every 2 years,
Yeah.
you wouldn't be good at what you do.
No.
You got to do it every day.
Yeah.
So I think that there has to be some type of, you guys are taking your own initiative
Yeah.
to educate yourself,
Well,
because
the phrase that I've been using is creating an academic level of understanding.
okay.
So to be a police officer, you have to know a wild amount of things, and most just know the bare minimum because, and a lot of it is because it's a lot of law. It's a lot of law, and laws change weekly, right? Weekly, daily. So in order to, if you want, and it's a job that's kind of like, it's this quasi profession, quasi labor, right? It's easy to attain. You can become a police officer relatively easy if you keep your background clean, and you have a decent degree or a decent level of education, a little bit of intelligence. You can write well. Problem solving skills are kind of there. You become a police officer, no big deal. It's not like medical school, right?
Right.
But then once you become a cop, you can very easily just slip off into not studying, not reading, not
The jelly donut coffee shop.
You've all seen them. You all know what they look like. You can do that. There's no fitness standard, and so it's kind of labor-like, right? Like we call it a profession, but sometimes it can be labor-like, and that bothers me. And it bothers the people of the association that I'm involved in. We want the standard raised. We would like it to be something that you have to do. You have to maintain a certain level of academic understanding.
Right.
And
once again, but that's coming from you guys. That's not.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what I'm really trying to highlight there is that
it's not. Yeah. This
isn't coming from the state.
Agency.
Yeah. This is not coming out of the agency. This is like you guys are.
It's a group.
That might be the positive of sometimes the negative of all the laws and changing, but it's like, okay, well, let's meet the standard and let's take the ownership of taking the ownership of meeting that. Yeah.
We want to reduce harm also.
Right.
Because what people forget is they're like, people go like, oh, these trigger happy cops. It's like, well, have you ever been on the other side of the gun when that's happening? It's like, it's not fun.
Yeah.
And so, no, you like wanting to be in a gunfight that's wildly stupid because it can end that fast for you also, right?
And forever.
And so it's like I've worked with a lot of police officers up and down the state of California, and no one likes it. So if we can reduce that part, the risk of that part of our job. Here's another thing that's happening right now is like mental health, right? Like mental health is a medical problem. It's not a criminal problem.
Right.
But that problem has been laid at the feet of police officers for as long as I've been alive. Right? Who do you call when someone's going through a mental crisis?
Yeah.
You call the cops.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that.
Yeah.
The doctors know that. The firefighters know that. The medics know that. The public knows that. The teachers know that. And everyone expects us to be the ones that solve that problem. But it's a medical problem. And the state has legislated and through these different court cases has basically instructed us. They're like, hey, you got to treat that problem different than the criminal problems. Medical's different, right? It's a medical problem. It's a psychiatric problem. You can't really show up and treat that problem the same as you treat someone who's committed a crime, like the Lululemon thing, right?
All right.
Okay. Well, then why are we showing up? Because I'm not a doctor.
Right.
I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not trained to deal with those type of things, and nothing on my body can help someone, right? Everything on my body that is used as a tool is meant to hurt someone or control them, right? So why am I the tool that's being used? I don't want to be the tool that's being used. I don't want to go, So you're watching, like Sacramento sheriffs came out and they said, we're not going to mental health problems anymore. Who are the first people who freaked out?
I don't know.
Firefighters.
Oh, okay.
Why?
Because they're going to call them.
Yeah, exactly. So like, well, how are we supposed to go now, right? And it's I don't know. You're figure it out, right? Like the public has spoken. The public has spoken, and they don't want to see us do the same thing over and over and over again.
Right.
We hear them. We just think that the answer is more training, more training in the books, understanding your constitutional authority to even be where you're at when you're there. We talked about First Amendment auditors when we were offline earlier, right? You see all these videos of these dudes, they show up and they're like, the guys.
I watch a lot of that shit too. It's just because for me it's more just entertaining. It is like just to see, and
it's
I like to see the
for
back.
Me too.
But you know what's funny? I know you're about to say something, but in real life, like a real interaction where that cop doesn't think he's being recorded and you're having that shit don't work like that.
True.
You're going to do exactly what he said. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, not to say, but of course he has his body camera.
I don't know. You and I know some people who probably, it might get a little spicy. So,
actually, that's true. That's true. Yeah, we're not going to go there.
Yeah,
but
So it was a joke, by the way, but what bothers me about those things is it goes back to the value of the association I'm in is when you get a camera put in your face and a part of this that the public has to also understand is that you don't get the thoughtful, considerate, measured, slow to decision-making police officer right out of the academy. Mm-hmm. It takes years of maturation to create that. It takes thousands of experiences to create that. Mm-hmm. You don't get, and people love to do that. It's like, man, why can't you be like officers, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, he got gray hair. You know what I mean? Like, he's been around the block a million times. Yeah. That's why he does what he does. Because, also, and we'll get into this, but like, what are you putting into the community that you police in, right? Like, do you coach kids? Do you know the people? Do you go get your hair cut in the community that you police in? Do you have connections with the faith community? Do you have community engagement is very, very, very important, and it's something that law enforcement didn't do. They only started doing that. Excuse me, I started to curse, but started doing that stuff 10 years ago. Facebook accounts, Instagram accounts, podcasts. All this stuff is only stuff that has just been starting to happen in the last 10 years because they realized that they were failing at it. And that's my point is back when I started, they didn't think that they had to. Now they're like, uh-oh, we need the community buy-in, right?
So you were saying this kind of pivot off what we were just talking about, but you were saying the guy from Academy is not going to act like the guy, you were saying that your job now at the high school, right? You're so glad that you walked into it with the training you have now than had it been, 15 years ago or 10 years. Tell me a little bit about that. And I'm gonna kind of tie in. I'm gonna kind of preface it, but tying it in with school shootings and the things that are happening in our schools today that are unprecedented in time now.
It is a tremendous responsibility. What the public doesn't know is that school resource officer within the law enforcement community is kind of like a joke job. Mm-hmm. It is a dead end, go nowhere type of a job. Law enforcement doesn't respect it. It's I was never in the military, so forgive me if for trying to draw this analogy if some of your viewers were, but it's kind of like being a cook in the military. You know what I mean? It's like you were in the Marine Corps. What did you do? And it's like, oh, I was a cook, and you're like, oh, okay. A little piece of you inside is like, all right. You know what I mean? Like that's what the job is like. Yeah. But I felt that way too before I did the job. And like I said, I started in, street level narcotics enforcement and went to a task force and did that, worked undercover, and then, I've done all the wild and crazy stuff, and then in detective work, and then going into the school, that's kind of what I expected. But I was ready for it because at the time I went into school, I had 15 years on, and I was like, okay, I'm ready for like a more of a chill assignment. What I found is that it is the most important assignment that I've worked to date.
Wow.
Working with the youth and so I don't focus on the 4.0, my son is a 4-point-something student. Like,
all right, that's what I'm talking about, Dad.
I see him at the I see him at the school, but I'm not focusing on him or his friends.
Probably because you're going to go to jail if he gets a 3.8.
Yeah, those are the kids that I don't necessarily interface with as much. I want to know all the kids that were like me in high school. Those are the kids that I want to touch. The kids that were like me and the kids that were like my friends. Because a lot of my friends from high school, they didn't turn out the way that I went right when everyone was going left, and like they continued going left. So those are the kids that I really, really, really make an effort to touch. Like I said earlier on your podcast, being an interdistrict transfer, I know what it's like to live in an area that doesn't have safe schools, and I know the pressure that it puts on parents of those children to do anything they can to put their kids in a school that's safe, they will lie. And rightfully so. You would too. Anybody and I hear people, talk about, these interdistrict transfers are a problem and and it's like, if you only knew the struggle, you would do the same thing. It's like would you steal if you were hungry? You know what I mean? Yes, you would. You know, and so I focus on those kids. Those are the kids that I spend all my time and effort on, trying to get to know them, understand their story, work on that. I had a kid that I used to call him the shot collar, because I'm like, I gotta go check in with my shot collar on the yard, right? And he shaped the culture of my campus, right? And I befriended him and learned a little bit about his life, and it wasn't long before, my wife and I opened up our door to that kid, and he was in my house, and I got criticism from my coworkers, and this kid is not, when I say it was risky, right?
Okay.
Like as I opened up the door to, now you know where I live,
right?
You know what I got in my house,
right?
You could set up a burglary when I'm not home and come through my house and take whatever you want. But the trust that we built with each other, I'm confident, even though he's probably out there criming and doing stuff, he's like, I'm not touching your house.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We watched him go from being this hardened person who feels like he has to make the world think he's something that he's not, to when he was at our house, he just turned into a kid. You know what I mean? And you could see it, right? Like, you see the innocence, So it's like, and my wife and I talked many nights, like what do we stand to risk by doing this, to trying to better his life and show him that you don't have, there's other ways. But we accepted that risk, and we tried. It didn't go well so far. Hopefully, that young man chose to move on with his life and to go do things. And some of the things that I suspect that he's associated with are violent, not good things, right? Okay. Like last year, he was I heard that he was, in Vallejo and got shot at, and some other things, and a buddy of his got hit and stuff like that. So it's like, and then him and I talked afterwards, and I'm like, now do you understand when I tell you, like, that's not the life you want to live? And he got tears in his eyes, and he's like, yeah, he's like I was trying to save my friend. He's my friend is bleeding out, and I'm trying to take my friend to the hospital, and I'm watching him die in my arms. And he's like, he calls me by my last name, because that's what everybody does. He's like, Coleman, I've never seen something like that in my life. And I'm like, yeah, man. And you have time now to pivot, right? That coaching football, I was blessed to.
I saw you on the football field at one game.
Yeah.
Last year.
You're a Vannon Vikings.
We were Sacramento.
You were the Vannon Vikings. Yeah.
Yeah. They won the championship too.
Vannon Vikings are like the damn Kansas City Chiefs right now in the regional,
man.
Man.
Killing it, man. They killing it.
God, man. My buddy's son is Kalani McLeod, so the high school Vannon quarterback that went and won state. So, I got to hear about Vannon way too much, but yeah, man. So like, I got involved in coaching, met that coaching staff, and they welcomed me onto the field. And when I started coaching football, I was like, I'm not a football coach. Yeah. I know how to teach fighting.
Yeah.
And so therefore I know how to teach some takedowns, which I can then kind of pivot into tackling. So I'll be your tackling coach. And then I started earning some respect, and I started earning, like, one of the president of the association was like, just started giving me more responsibility, and then I ended up working my way up. But I love being out there on the field with those kids.
Yeah.
I'll leave practice, and I mean, you get to know intimately what people are going through. Like, there's parents in the crowd that I've arrested, right? Like, but they see me on the football field, and they know that it's all love, right? They see how I am with their children, and they're like, okay, like, he's a good dude, right? I was giving a speech last year about parents, like, not parking in red zones and doing stuff and whatnot. And like, one of the dudes afterwards was like, what's up, Coleman? And I was like, I don't know you, dude, and he's like, oh, you know me. And I'm like, I do. And he's like, oh yeah. I'm like, where from? He's like, I won't say the neighborhood, but he's like, neighborhood. And I go, oh, okay. I'm like, it was all good. He was like, you were always fair. I'm like, all right, right on, man. But then every time I see him, we just dap each other up, and it's all good, So like, I think all of that is important. What you put in to the community is what you get out of the community. You know what I mean? And I think that's all things. That's always that way, right? Like, you can't just, it's like a business too, right? Like, you don't want to be a business that just takes. That's why these businesses do a lot with, donating and, giving back to the community and stuff like that, man. Like, I don't know. I just think in some ways we've kind of, law enforcement we've hurt ourselves because we kind of removed ourselves a little bit. Like, there's too many guys I work with that are too scared to know people. There's a little bit of a narrative in law enforcement that, like, you need to don't have an Instagram, don't have a Facebook, stay off the internet, don't be out, like, and what that does is it puts you into a position where no one knows you. Right. So then no one knows you, they don't know your heart. Right. So then all of a sudden you have to do something, and I said have to, right? You have to do something, and the public doesn't understand because they don't know you, right? But when you know somebody, you're like, I know that guy. Like, yeah. I'm sure it was a difficult decision, but he had to do what he had to do. Yeah. I don't know, but.
Well, thanks, man. I got one question for you before we go. So, if money wasn't an option, you hit the lotto. There's $1 billion almost every week now. It seems like in a lottery. But if you hit the $1 billion jackpot, money's not an option. What would Josh be doing?
So if money was not an option, at this stage in my life, I'm not working. Okay.
I mean, we know that.
Okay. I'm not working.
I'm not working either.
Okay. So what I would do with my time, I would have to be busy though. Okay?
Of course. Yeah.
So I'm buying, we're not talking about what I'm buying with that $1 billion, right? We're talking about what I'm going to do with it.
What would Josh do? What would Josh Coleman do? It's your answer.
I'm going to travel a lot, but I think what I would do is I would create some sort of nonprofit, or I would try to put make my work and my time and my effort and my passion working on young people and trying to create. One of the things that I keep saying, I say this at the high school a lot, is like, there's too many kids that don't have. I got a friend of mine who's a hunter, right? I got a lot of friends that are hunters. And one of the dudes the other day, I was going to go on a hunting trip. It got canceled, but I was going to go. And this guy's like, I never pegged you for a hunter, right? He's like, I never really pegged you for a hunter guy. And my response to him was, hunting's about access, man.
That's about most things, huh?
Hunting's about access.
Yeah.
I never had access to this. I grew up in apartment complexes. Dad wasn't around. Nobody did this. So I don't know anything about it, right? I would want to create a program where I took kids that had little access to a lot of these spaces of the world. Travel is a big one.
Yeah.
Think about the first time you traveled and what that did to you mentally, right? First time you got out of the country.
I went to Europe for the first time last year, and I mean, as a grown man, my whole perspective of like life just just really just
and you're like, oh, like what? Like, this is like all the things I think about the world. There's so much more to it, right? And so travel, industry, wineries, financial planning. Like, I know so many people, and that's what's really cool about your podcast, is because of where you live and what you do now, you have access to all these cool people who do behind the camera right now.
Yeah. Filthy Phil.
That do all of these cool things. But think about how many I'm thinking of the kid that I was working on, right? Like, in his world, it's just my buddies, get in the car with my buddies, and we're going to go bip cars and steal stuff, and I don't have access to anybody who does any of those cool things.
Right.
And it's like, well, if you did, you could change that kid's life, right? And so that's probably what I would try to do with my money.
Cool. Cool. All right. Thank you for coming, man.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it, man.
It's like in my face.
Yeah. So, man, that's my man Josh, and thank you guys for watching this interview, and we're gonna bring more exciting content to you, man, and we'll be here next week, next month, whenever we come back, man. I just want to bring exciting people who are doing extraordinary things in the community of Napa and eventually worldwide. But right now, we're going to focus on our community first and make sure home is tight before we take this anywhere else. So we'll see you next time, man.